I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to opine on what I don't yet know. But we're going to find out exactly what happened here, and then we'll respond accordingly.
According to an unnamed U.S. official, we're bringing this to you. You can check the references. The firefight involved a U.S. civilian boat that was part of a flotilla to get relatives out of Cuba. Speaking of some tough people, the Cubans. Now, Cuba is very unique in a lot of ways, as are its potential voters. It's the opposite of Puerto Rico. Okay, and I am going to make a case here, and I know legislatively I'll tell you what it needs to be done, that Cuba, there's a strong case for it potentially, if stuff goes down, us liberating them and absorbing them into Florida. Then it renders all of the swing states irrelevant, and we have the closest thing to a super state like California on the right, because it's one of the most consistently conservative voting blocs in America, Cuban Americans. These people want to be liberated. At some point in time, it's going to happen. You can't have an island that close right off our shores with Russian, Chinese influence. It's a national security issue, and things may be escalating. And I know you'll say it's a psyop because we want to go to war with Cuba, but we're not talking about boots on the ground. A few flyovers could really take care of most of it. So yesterday, some Cuban security forces killed 4 and injured 6 what we're hearing right now, or more individuals on a Florida-registered speedboat. Will give you some of the context because Cuban government says one thing, and there are other reports that say the exact opposite.
We begin with breaking news just off the coast of Cuba.
Local 10 is learning a speedboat from Florida made it to the island. The Cuban government confirming tonight it killed 4 people on board, with another 6 left injured, fearing it was an attack.
That boat was registered here in Florida, and it was in Cuban waters. We do know this morning 4 men were killed, 6 others were injured. Those injured were medically assisted. It was some sort of confrontation with a Cuban vessel.
And of course, Marco Rubio, champing at the bit, did issue a statement on this because those are his, former people. He's American, but he has a heart for the Cuban people.
So this morning, we were made aware by Cuban authorities of an incident off the coast of Cuba. We immediately began to look into it. As it stands now, the Department of Homeland Security, the Coast Guard, others are involved. The majority of the information we still possess is what Cuban authorities are providing both the public and the U.S. government. We have our embassy on the ground in Havana working this as we speak, asking for access to the people that were on those vessels, if they were American citizens or permanent residents. According to the Cuban regime, that the boat was registered in Florida. The majority of the facts being publicly reported are those by the information provided by the Cubans. We will verify that independently, and as we gather more information, then we'll be prepared to respond accordingly. I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to opine on what I don't yet know, but we're going to find out exactly what happened here, and then we'll respond accordingly.
Oh, and you know that he really wants to respond accordingly. He's just itching for it, as seen behind the scenes.
Get out of my doorway, motherfucker! Give me a reason. Just give me a fucking reason! You don't know what I'm capable of! Come on, please! You don't know what I'm capable of!
Like, he needs to tone it down.
No, he doesn't.
But I understand.
I love it.
Which brings us to a little he said, she said. So he said. Okay. So that was Rubio, but there were some reports, according to an unnamed U.S. official. We're bringing this to you. You can check the references. The firefight involved a U.S. civilian boat that was part of a flotilla to get relatives out of Cuba, adding that the vessel was not a U.S. Navy or Coast Guard boat. Now, a couple of things here. We're going to get to what they said, the Cuban government, who can never be trusted. Initially, there were reports that this was a drug boat, because they were trying to smuggle in drugs. If you bring up the picture, it does not look like a drug boat. They would have a pretty substantial boat in comparison.
Looks like Dexter's boat.
Yeah, so I tend to believe that that's what was going on, as opposed to what the Cuban government is trying to tell you. And here's also, this is a key difference between what the left accuses of being fascism versus actual fascism. Here in the United States, we try and keep illegal invaders out. True fascist governments, and people try and separate fascism and communism, they don't let their people leave. And if you look throughout history, you can look to Nazi Germany, same thing. You can look to Stalin. You can look to Maoist China. You can look to the USSR. They don't let their people leave. They're not really concerned with keeping people out. As a matter of fact, I can tell you this, one of the few people who spent time in Havana under a Canadian passport filming a commercial. It was ridiculous. Rising Crust Pizza commercial. There was no reason to be there. And then entertaining the troops in Guantanamo Bay. You know, one of the biggest threats in Guantanamo Bay, the reason they had people on that wall, on that fence, is Cubans trying to get in to Gitmo. They would rather be prisoners of Gitmo than citizens of Cuba, which brings us to the Cuban government. She said. So they said that all participants, they were Cuban nationals living in the United States. They were attempting to infiltrate and conduct terrorist activities, and that weapons were seized, including assault rifles, Molotov cocktails, also a box of exploding cigars destined for current President Miguel Diaz-Canel. Now, people will look at this and say, well, the American boat fired first. Sure, I understand that. But you would too if you were trying to get some people out of Cuba, if they were trying to flee, and then Cuban government officials came upon you. Because now you have a choice to make. Go away forever or fight. So there is some missing context here. I tend to believe that they were trying to get some Cuban nationals out because we've seen that time and time again. Now, you have some on the left who are parroting the Cuban government line, right? And this will bring us to the black pillars later. They're trying to tell you that, see, your government is just looking for a reason for war. And, Michael Moore said that Cuba actually has better health care than us here in the United States. The left always lines up with opposing governments and their propaganda. They'll use Hamas's numbers when talking about the Israeli conflict. They will use Cuba's statements when discussing our relations. So let me give you some other examples, though, as to why you may not want to trust the government of Cuba. In 1994, the 13 de Marzo tugboat massacre. The Cuban government deliberately sank refugee vessels, one in particular killing 41, including 10 children, and the Cuban government called it an accident.
Whoops.
2010, there was the Missouri hospital deaths. 26 psychiatric patients died from starvation and prolonged neglect. The Cuban government claimed that they died from cold temperatures.
In Cuba?
In Cuba.
What?
In Cuba,
Hold on.
the microclimate after which the humidor is modeled. 70 degrees and 70% humidity.
Yeah. Do they have like a really tall mountain nobody knows about where these patients were being stored? What the hell is going on?
Have a great air conditioner.
Yeah.
So when people talk about like the USS Liberty, which we've discussed that, sure, but this has been happening all the time too with the Cuban government. They've constantly been a bad actor. 2012, the Oswaldo Paya assassination. The Cuban government, they murdered a pro-democracy advocate, and then they claimed that he died in a car accident. So
Yeah, they dropped a car on him.
yeah, exactly, like an Acme anvil.
Yeah.
So here's also why I think, look, people are saying this may be a reason for escalation, and we're just looking for a reason to, go to war. Well, let's think about this for a second. If it looks like Venezuela, if it looks like removing their dictator and giving people there a fighting chance, also what will we get from it? Would a secure Cuba be in our national security interest? Would it be in the interests of not only American people, of course, first and foremost, but the Cuban people? And could they work together? Would it be a mutually beneficial change for Cuba to be liberated? Yes, and I think it should become a part of Florida if we go that route. And the left is terrified of that. Make no mistake, the left is terrified of a free Cuban people because they can't use them as a poster child. They use Cuba as a poster child for communist success for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work anymore. So look at Cuban Americans. You can check the references. Cubans here in the United States, they are the most consistent conservative voting bloc in America. 2024, 70% of Cuban Americans voted for Trump. 80% of people with a Cuban spouse voted Republican. You don't find that anywhere else, that level of consistency. There was a little bit of an outlier with Barack Obama where some switched and they've swung back hard right. Different from other Hispanic, Latin American countries because these people have faced communism. Typically, people who flee communism, they make sure that their children and their grandchildren know what that's like. Not people who come from a bad economy, so they're ungrateful. People who had to actively risk something. Cuban Americans are a very different breed. This brings us to some celebrity examples here. By the way, 11 a.m. Eastern, that's when we stream. Tune in if you're watching a clip. There's this Cuban singer, by the way, who's not a Trump fan, to be clear, but this brings us to She Said. This is Camila Cabello. She called out Cuba's regime, okay? She wrote, "It has been 67 years of a falling dictatorship and an oppressive regime. The Cuban people are suffering in an echo chamber where no one can hear them because to speak is to risk your life. Many people are starving, looking for food in trash heaps, and the only way to survive is having relatives ship you boxes of medicine because not even the hospitals have medicine." Fact check true. I have quite a few close friends who are Cuban Americans whose parents lived there. So that's what she's saying.
Yeah.
As a notable Cuban who has family there in Cuba. By the way, not even a Trump supporter. Pretty anti-Trump, if I'm not mistaken. But she understands the reality of Cuba. So those on the left, terrified that Americans may learn of the perils of communism, well, that brings us to, he said, Hassan Piker chiming in saying, nah, don't believe her lived experiences.
I tweeted gross when I saw this. Do you know how stupid that statement is? The entire planet that is terrified of coming out against the United States of America has said time and time again over the past 67 years, please end the blockade. This is completely unjustifiable. Please release the Cuban population, free them, allow them to exist normally, allow them to engage in commerce, allow them to actually grow their country. And America has said, no, you are medically stupid if this is your take. It's disgusting. It's extra disgusting when you're parroting this imperialist propaganda at a time of crisis when your family members are directly being starved by the American government.
Oh, that's right.
Wake the up, dude.
Here's what's funny to me. And this, I don't mean funny, haha. I mean funny, he's functionally retarded. Yes. So you don't blame the Cuban government, which has been effectively a dynasty for a very long time, and you wear the founder of the feast, Che Guevara, you wear him on your T-shirts, the guy who bragged about executing without trial and was intensely racist and also killed gays while we're at it. You don't blame them, okay? You also don't blame the USSR. You also don't blame Russia or China, the two biggest trading partners on Earth who engage in trade with Cuba. Why can't they help them? Why aren't they enough? You blame the United States for choosing not to support the government. Let's also change one thing. Okay, when we went to Cuba, we were made very aware that any money you give people, any tips that can be tracked, it doesn't go to the people. It goes to the government. That's why Canadians, you can sound off. People who would go on vacation in Cuba, which I'm not a fan of, by the way. I was there for work. You would leave makeup. You would leave cosmetics. You would leave soap. You would leave snacks. You would leave candy, chiclets. You'd leave it in a suitcase open for the housekeepers because it was something that couldn't be tracked, that they could take home to their families. Now, if the United States said, hey, we lift the blockade and Americans can go and spend millions upon millions of dollars with no change in government, do you think they're going to go, wow, look at this. We have such a bounty. We're actually going to allow it to go to our people? Or do you think they would still, in practice, follow their communist beliefs that they need to control means of production, distribution, revenue, and distribute it how they see fit? What would change aside from many, 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 many millions or billions of dollars going to the Cuban government? Why would it all of a sudden go to the people? Why no responsibility for China and Russia? The left will blame the United States for the plight of Cuba. And since they want to do that, hey, how about this? If this escalates and we get into a conflict, let's make Cuba a part of Florida. I mean, it would need to be a territory first, just to be clear. I understand all that. You need to vote 2/3 of the Senate. You need a majority of the House. You need the Florida legislature approval, all that. I get it. But the population of Florida would grow from 23 million to 34 million. You'd gain 14 congressional seats. 14 congressional seats, and it would be a guaranteed hard red state the way California is blue, rendering all other swing states irrelevant. Guarantee you, huge portion of the Cuban people would be happy with it, not to mention immediate economy. The agriculture, what we could do is easily incentivize. We wouldn't need to subsidize like we do American farmers, but incentivize purchasing sugarcane, fruit, some of the major exports from Cuba. The tourism alone would turn many of them into what we know as middle-class Americans, which they have never seen in their country. And it would be in our national security interest to have something there as opposed to potentially a landing point for communist adversarial nations. So I think that if this escalates, Cuba becomes Florida, and that's it. I guarantee you wouldn't get enough votes from the left. Why not? The same people who want Puerto Rico? Why do you think? Oh, that's right, because they want a voting base. Only in this case, you would actually have people who would contribute. They'd be net tax contributors. And we can make a go of it, and it'd be better for everyone around. You let me know what you think. I'm saying beyond the territory. Cuba, you're now part of Florida. It's the latest key. You could shoot the latest bloodline there.
There you go. Just don't make anybody do that. Listen, I think that's actually a really fun idea to consider, and I think it would be way better for the Cuban people. And it's not like potentially a stepping stone. I think there was film of this. It's not really a secret. Russia has bases there. Of
course.
The submarines going in and out. And I'm like, listen, Hassan, like this should be your paradise. This should be like everything that you said that the United States wasn't, and everything that every other country on the planet could be. This communist hellhole. And they have the support of the rest of the communist hellholes on the planet. They should be nothing but a thriving civilization in paradise. And yet, the way that you frame it, they are being held hostage by the United States. They need to be set free from the United States, which doesn't really have anything to do with them anymore, other than having a base there. That's about it. And we don't really talk to you guys much. Why is it that it's our problem to fix their society that's kind of stuck in the 1950s if communism really is the way?
There's nothing stopping from Hassan Piker from defecting and setting up shop in Cuba.
He should go live there.
You could stream from there.
Yeah.
You could do it from there. You'd be able to travel back and forth. You don't have to worry about locate. Well, that's right. The government may not allow you to.
No, that's true. Yeah.
They may seize your equipment, and by that I mean definitely seize your equipment. But I'm sure that would be, you could blame that on the American government somehow. None of these people ever do. They never do. They'll go on a propaganda walking tour in China, and that's about it. But they stay stateside. The left is terrified of the Cuban people's conservatism, and they are terrified of Cuban Americans, their lived experiences. That's why they try to silence them on a regular basis. Why wouldn't they? When they talk about marginalized people, why doesn't the left discuss Cuban Americans? Have you guys ever thought of that? Like, these are people who have actually risked life and limb to get here, fled communism.
Yeah.
They're certainly a minority. A lot of them come here and don't speak English. Maybe if you go down to Little Havana in Florida, you might understand why. The American flags would give them PTSD.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, you're still here? And you're still watching this on YouTube? You've probably noticed something is missing by now. I'm not here. That's because the Live Daily Show is now streaming exclusively on Rumble weekdays at 11 a.m. Eastern. Tune in there, where nothing is censored.